You're listening to Symposium, a year-round conference in the arts, brought to you by Pipeline Artists. All of you guys who are listening in tonight, if you listen to Reckless Creatives, you already know the vibe. Like, we kind of wing it at all times. I try to be a little more prepared for Symposium, but since it was a Reckless Creatives live, I thought I would just hit the normal amount of preparation, which is none. So welcome. So tonight Sadie and I are going to talk to Scott Myers about his book, about tons of other stuff. But before, I will do a formal introduction of Scott. Scott's written over 30 movie and TV projects at almost every major Hollywood studio and broadcast network. His screenwriting credits include K9, Alaska, and Trojan War. Since 2008, Scott has hosted GoIntoTheStory.com, the official screenwriting blog of The Blacklist, which is awesome. And if you don't read it, you should. And it's his Blacklist blog birthday today. 15
Happy birthday.
15 years.
15 years. That's why there's margarita in my cup. Just to be clear. And it was named Best of the Best Screenwriting Website by Writer's Digest. He is, and by the way, Scott, I nominated you for that, just so you know.
I know. Blessings upon you.
He has taught masterclasses and led workshops in England, France, Germany, Spain, Greece, and Mexico, and has been featured guest at prominent festivals and conferences across the United States. Author of The Protagonist Journey, an introduction to character-driven writing and storytelling, and an Amazon #1 rated bestseller in film and television, Scott is currently an assistant professor of screenwriting at DePaul University. And Sadie Dean, my co-host of Reckless Creatives, is the editor-in-chief at Script Magazine. And she's a musician, little rock star. Notice the little guitars behind you. And she wrote our theme song for Reckless Creatives, which I'll have to put in the recording, Sadie. We're going to just get at it. And Sadie and I are going to chat away to Scott, but feel free to pop questions in there in the Q&A, because this is your chance to directly ask Scott some questions as well. So, Scott, so happy to have you here. Happy birthday to the blog.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to you when Sadie and I talked to you already on Reckless. You were saying the motivation behind this. And if you look through mine, you'll see a lot of like yellow highlights because I loved it.
Same here.
Character driven. And Look at the tabs.
Yeah, it's insane. It's great.
So talk to us about the motivation behind it. You've been blogging and writing so much about screenwriting. What made you say now is the time for the world to have another screenwriting book?
That's exactly what kept me from writing it in the first place. Was what, another screenwriting? I'm old enough to remember when it was basically Sid Field, and that was it. Screenplay, the foundations of screenwriting. I mean, it's like literally maybe the only screenwriting book I've officially like read from cover, from cover to back cover. But that was back in 1986 when I first discovered screenwriting. But as you know, you can't go into any bookstore anywhere, like in Minot, North Dakota, there's a screenwriting section with like dozens of screenwriting books because it's just exploded in popularity since the 80s. And I had no intention of writing a book. It's like, why? What's the point? But Palgrave Macmillan, which is a very well-respected publishing company out of London, England, it's been around since like the 1850 or something like that. We had conversations and they suggested, I can do my English accent. Scott, why don't you check out like what textbooks they're using in the screenwriting, the film studies programs? And so I did. I was like, really? They're using these books? I won't name them, but I was like, this is what they're using for teaching, the future storytellers of America. And so
was it Screenwriting for Dummies?
Notch above, maybe.
That was the first screenwriting book I ever read. Go on.
Yeah. But the thing that really bothered me was there were no books out there focusing on character writing. And that's been my whole thing, all along the way. So we had conversations and I said, yeah, I'll agree to do this thing. It was in now that I look back on it, I mean, I'm glad it's done, let me tell you, but it was really hard to write because it's not like screenwriting, oh, it's a scene, these characters, these, I get to just kind of play around with them and feel my way through it. No, this was like, this analysis of Silence of the Lambs resulted in with a footnote here, And so it was really hard writing. Plus, I wanted it to be readable. I didn't want it to be like a dry tome that's going to be, sitting in some library somewhere. So anyhow, that was the motivation for it. I saw that there was a need, frankly. I mean, there are books out there that do talk about character, but not quite the way that I do.
Yeah.
And so the title of the book is The Protagonist's Journey, an Introduction to Character-Driven Screenwriting and Storytelling. And it really is that. There's a mantra: begin with character, end with character, find the story in between. And that's what it's all about.
It's really wonderful. And what I like about it is that, I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of things with Scott, but with this book, what I love about it is I'm big on like action items. So like he really like takes you through, like, ask your character these things, like figuring the whole premise is figuring out don't figure out your plot points first, figure out who these people are, because if you don't know who they are, how can you take them on a journey? It's brilliant. And I don't really read writing books anymore, but this one and it's great for novelists too. If any of you are out there, not any kind of storyteller, was there anything that surprised you when you did this book? Did you learn anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah. First of all, one of the things I wanted to do, in which we, again, had conversations with Palgrave Macmillan. Well, there are several things I wanted to do. First of all, I heard a lot of complaints from students about, well, all the examples are like Casablanca or Sunset Boulevard or, To Have and Have Not, all these great movies.
Yeah.
Right. But they're from, these young people nowadays, because I teach at a university, these
youngins.
Yeah, these youngins, So I wanted to include contemporary titles. And so that was a lot of area of focus for me. Another thing, a lot of the books, evidently, when I'm told, don't include TV, which is like, well, it's become quite popular nowadays. I mean, in some respects, I think TV is as cinematic as film. And so I did a lot of research on TV, particularly in the last 10, 15 years. And so that was another thing. And I learned a lot, by doing that. I do watch a lot of TV, but not the way that I did when I was researching this. There's over 300 titles that I reference in the book between films and TV. So it's a lot of research that I did. And the third thing was I wanted to make sure that it included a diversity of gender, ethnicity, religious interests, just a real, neurodivergence. So the stories that I chose there and the topics I chose to discuss reflect the diversity of the human experience. And so I did. I learned a lot in that process. I also learned how to footnote. so there's that.
You probably could have spent your whole life not knowing how to do that, and it would have been okay.
It would have been fine.
Well, I was writing it right there in the middle of the lockdown. It's like you talk. Hero's journey, right? I don't want to oversell what I did, but, dragging my ass down to my office in the basement, I like these nice dark rooms. And during the middle of lockdown, just knowing that I have to do this, not technical writing, but just challenging writing. And then I had shoulder surgery for 2 months and I was like literally using one finger to type, and so it was quite a process. It took 21 months to write, but I'm glad it's done. Yeah.
I'm glad it's done too. Like I told you before in the podcast, I wish this book existed when I was starting out in film school. And it's just such it's a tome of just greatness and all these writing exercises that you have in here, even down to like your master brainstorming list. It gives you that creative freedom to just really let loose, and you're not restricting us like some of the other books do, where they say you can't do this, you can't do that. And I love there's like a line I highlighted in here where it's just you're take free reign of your creative instincts and you encourage wild ideas, and I think that just says it all. I mean, that's what we got to do as screenwriters.
Yeah, well, Sadie, you hit right on it. I mean, the book is divided into three parts, and it goes from more theoretical to more practical as you go through it. Of course, three parts, like 3 act structure. I mean, I literally went to my brother's cabin up in northern Minnesota and broke the story just like I would break a screenplay with index cards and everything. The first part is the protagonist's journey as narrative imperative, which is that if you really dig down into your protagonist character and they start off in my language, a state of disunity, they need to change. Like Joseph Campbell says, they're just making do at the beginning of the hero's journey. They need to change. You dig down to their deepest need, not the surface level, not the sort of like generic thing. There's a reason why this story has to happen. The journey they go on is a journey they need to go on. And that's the need that you need to be dealing with. You go all the way down to that, then that takes you to the end point. It's like it suggests the plot just from that. And so, yes, that idea that that you can immerse yourself in the lives of your characters, particularly your protagonist, and you keep that third part where you do these exercises, right? The protagonist character treatment, the brainstorming. There's another thing. I hadn't seen anything that really focused on that, which is like such a critical part of the story writing process is getting to know the characters and allowing yourself the freedom to just wallow in the creative mud. You know, you do these exercises and give yourself over to like the stream of consciousness and monologue, and all the stuff is popping up and you're like, what does this mean? Well, don't pre-edit it, include it. You never know whether it's going to mean anything. I just had a conversation today with someone. I was saying, you know, look, whether you believe it's coming from your subconscious or whether you believe it's like a parallel universe where the characters exist in some sort of magical way, it's their story. They're the ones living it. They know it better than you do. Just get to know them. You know, extend your hand out by doing these exercises. You're saying to them, I want to write your story. Please come talk to me. And it just, I don't know, it just happens. So the first part is all about theory and the protagonist's journey. The second part is the family of characters, which is the character archetypes, protagonist, nemesis, attractor, mentor, trickster, which I've found quite fascinating. And then the third part is very practical, breaking your story. 6 stages from concept to outline. Yeah.
I actually took all of your little exercise. I made a little spreadsheet.
Genius.
Yeah, you know, I can be a little nerdy, but but it helps me to learn, you know, when I learn things, I have to do them. So like, you know, typing out the questions, typing it made me think about, okay, you know, thinking about the characters that I'm working on now. Have you always written from the point, the origin point of character, or is this something that you came on after maybe writing some scripts and realizing maybe I'm doing this backwards? Like, have you always come at it from that point?
I don't honestly remember. It's been a long time ago. You know, I wrote my first script in 1986. I tell my students I like the Paleolithic era for them. You know, so I don't really remember. The first script was Write What You Know, right? I wrote a script called Stand Up. I was doing stand-up comedy at the time, so I wrote a script called Stand Up. And I can't, you know, I mean, I do remember the characters, and I read it, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, or flipped through it and then dropped, decided it was such a mess. I think that honestly, when I started teaching is where it all started to come together, because when you teach, you have to synthesize your ideas in a way that you can communicate them to people effectively. And I started to realize that this was an instinct for me, you know, that this starting with character and really learning who they are, what they're about. So I think it evolved, but teaching has really been an eye-opener for me. I've talked to a lot of people when they've had to teach, almost all of them say, yeah, I learned more about writing, you know, by doing that than in the actual writing process. So it's evolved over time. But I also too, I was a huge fan of Joseph Campbell when I was in college. That's even older than 1986. I mean, it's way back. I mean, I still have I don't know if it's still here, but my copy of The Hero with a Thousand Faces from 1973 when I was in an honors program at UVA. But I found out that Campbell was a huge fan of Carl Jung. And I'm not a Jungian. I don't know, but I know that his process, his theory of individuation, that is the protagonist's journey. I mean, and so I started reading Carl Jung, and just like he's alchemy. He's a big, that's one of his metaphors, alchemist. And I started just synthesizing and putting together these things from him because they just seem to fit very well. So that helped because, he believes that our psychological task, our task as human beings, is to get in touch with all aspects of ourself, everything, including the shadow, the darker negative impulses. And that's what the protagonist's journey is ultimately. Campbell says that it's an outer journey, but really fundamentally it's an inner journey. That's why they go on the trip. That's why they do what they do, is to find themselves, the inner side aspect of themselves. So I don't know. It's a wide-ranging sort of response, but yeah, I think it's evolved over time, and it's been gratifying to see people I've worked with really respond to this.
Yeah. And I feel like that, thinking about yourself and your own, your character's motivations, it's also something that I think a lot of writers, they sometimes work out their own problems on the page in their stories, and you think about writers and their careers. You've seen a lot come and go, and a lot never get there. More than not get there, just from statistically. Sometimes I feel like there's that inability to be reflective and introspective and think like, what am I doing to stand in my own way? And I personally feel, we talked about therapy in our last session, but I personally feel that if writers can learn and be open to doing that for themselves, that will exponentially help them do that for their characters. That there's some things we sometimes try to protect ourselves. And one of the biggest complaints people have about protagonists is that they're too protected, and that, the writer didn't push them hard enough, and all of that. I feel like your exercises, maybe you could be a therapist.
Yeah.
Well, I did go to Yale Divinity School. I didn't get an MFA. I got a master's of a divinity degree.
Oh my.
There you go.
And I was actually ordained in the United Methodist Church. They have a dual ordination, like the first stage, which is like to explore whether you really want to do this or not, and then there's the final stage. I did it more because of, very frankly, I mean, have a religious background, but by doing that, I was able to land a gig at an Episcopal church, leading their folk rock music service in the morning, and then being a student minister. So it facilitated that. But, not to diminish the fact I'm very interested in theology. But Jeannie, to your point, I did take some classes in counseling, and, got some training on that. But that's had, I think if you're a writer, I don't know, maybe I'm generalizing too much, but because I am fundamentally sort of introspective, and I'm an observer, I'm very curious about people. I think writers should be good therapists, good listeners, good observers. Did we talk about this the last time, that question, take what they say and then turn it into a question? Did we talk about that? That's such a great thing to do. I learned that because my dad was in the Air Force, and we moved around a lot. This is even before I went to Yale. The best way to make friends is just to be curious about them. Hey, how you doing? What's going on today? Oh, and so one of the exercises we have, if you remember from the book, is the interview, where you are imagining like you're a psychiatrist and they're the patient, and you take what they say and simply rephrase it as a question. This is actually a therapeutic type of technique. You're affirming that you've heard them by saying, oh, so, this is a story I always used to say, was I lived 3 houses down from Archie Moore's bar in New Haven, Connecticut, and I had no money. This in graduate school. I had no money. I'd go in and order a 35-cent beer, a little draft beer thing. And then the guys in the neighborhood, it was blue collar neighborhood, would show up from work, and I'd use this technique to get free beer. because, hey, Biff, how you doing? Oh, I have a tough day. Yeah, my boss. Oh, you got problems with your boss? Oh, yeah, I came in late today, 10 minutes. And he says, so you came in 10 minutes late and he was like really mean to you? You just repeat, and you do this after about 5 or 10 minutes, and Biff's going, hey, barkeep, and he's giving you free beer. So you can do that with your characters, just get curious and keep going deeper and deeper. But to your point, I think, yeah, we should be good therapists. We should be good listeners. We should be good observers, as writers. That's where everything comes from, if we engage life in that intentional way. So, yes.
Yeah. And the deep dive that you propose in this book, that we do is, characters are complex. So it's okay to just get crazy with it, because there's really no wrong or right answer. Whatever just comes to mind is what it is. And it could be totally weird or super mundane, but that's your character, and just roll with it.
Sometimes the characters will be very forthcoming. They'll be very open-minded and share whatever they have with you. But sometimes, like Jeannie was saying, they may be very buttoned up. They may not want to talk to you. And so, you've got to, that's why there's these 6 different exercises. Sometimes if they shut down on the interview, then you go, okay, well, I'm going to step out here and do a little biography. Who are they? Why are they? Where are they? How are they? Or then I'm going to do that Vulcan mind meld thing where I'm going to sit down and get into a meditative type of an environment and just blind type for 10 or 15 minutes with them in my head or me in their head. So yeah, this is a thing. This is why I think characters are messy. Stories are not, it's not widgets, and I think that a lot of books, this is what I hear, tend to reduce screenplay structure and story to plot. Well, yeah, plot is important, but how you get there is so critical. And if you ground it in your characters and let them direct the process, even though it's messy, because you, like Sadie was saying, sometimes they'll be all over the place and you'll feel like, what is going on? But you keep drilling down and find that essence of what they're about, then that just enlightens you and tells you, how and where the story should go. So, yeah.
That's what I love about your book, because it wasn't like that you didn't read all these other books. So I think that also helped it be super fresh, because you were really just coming at it from a perspective, I don't know what these people said. I'm just telling you what works for me. And that's awesome. There's a question that Keith has over here. Do character-driven stories have to have a strong external antagonist, or can a compelling story have the protagonist be their own antagonist?
Yeah, that's a good question. The path of least resistance as far as Hollywood is concerned is I think they'd prefer to have an antagonist figure or a nemesis figure. Just practically speaking, they may not understand story to the degree that a writer does necessarily, like a development executive, but they know that you can't have drama without conflict. Mm-hmm. And what's the simplest way to have conflict than having a protagonist versus a nemesis? Also, pragmatically, that nemesis represents potentially a great second actor in your project. So, but that's just the path of least resistance. If you are writing a story and there is no specific character who has that function, and the baseline function is they just provide opposition to the protagonist. That's all. When you really boil it down, they're creating opposition, and it really is more about, say, a psychological block, or maybe even a physical condition. My left foot, psychological block, like Melvin and As Good as It Gets, who's got a like obsessive compulsive type of a thing. Yeah, you can have that, but you can also just have that they're, Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs was just afraid to go down where she needed to go and deal with that horrific experience of reliving her father's death through her imagination. She wasn't there when he died, when he was shot, but also the slaughter of the spring lambs. So I definitely think that characters will they don't want to change. That's fundamentally, that's why that first half of the second act, I call it this unit deconstruction. It's like their old ways of being, which they pulled together before Fade In, behaviors and beliefs and coping skills and defense mechanisms and habits that they've managed to cobble together some semblance of a life, but it's not their authentic life. It's an inauthentic life, using the psychological language. Well, that deconstruction mode, typically first half of Act 2, is breaking down who they used to be. And who wants to go through that, right? 9 times out of 10 in stories, no, they don't. And so they'll often suffer physical harm. They're stranger in a strange land, fish out of water, so they will resist that. And so in that respect, yeah, right there, that's in fact acting like an oppositional dynamic. They don't want to change. In fact, that's one of the things, right? The call to adventure, Joseph Campbell talks about the refusal of the call. Right there, they are acting not in their own best interest. They may think they are, but ultimately where they need to go, they aren't. So yes, you can have characters who are their own, nemesis. An interesting example is Jack Torrance in The Shining, who embraces his shadow over the course of the story. He goes in a negative trajectory. There's a lot of characters like that end up embracing their negative energy. It eats them up or takes them over. So it's possible. I know there's some people out there in the online screenwriting universe who say, no, the protagonist can't be their own nemesis or whatnot. Whatever.
Yeah.
There's no rules.
Yeah, this reminds me I actually just had this really interesting conversation with, of all people, Emilio Estevez, about a movie that he wrote and directed called The Way, that came out like 13 years ago. It's actually just being re-released today, I think. But we're talking about character arcs and how he approaches it, and especially with the movie that he wrote, which is about the pilgrimage and this character going through that. And he's like, every studio I went to, they said no, because they kept asking, well, what's the arc? Where does the character end up, and what are they doing? And he's like, well, they're walking, and it's that journey. He's like, nobody wants to watch that movie. So he figured it out and made the movie himself. But it is, and he was like, at the end of the day, like, do we have character arcs? Do you know people who actually changed drastically? He's like, I have friends from 50 years ago and they're the same people. But it's that journey of, what is that little thing? And for that movie, for those of you who haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's just such a great character study of just what you can do with, one idea of just walking on a pilgrimage, and it's all like very internal. And that character played by his father, Martin Sheen, it's all, it's very internal, and it's just about him reconnecting with his son, but he has to go through this, mental, I don't know, it's really profound. It's really a great movie. I highly recommend it. But yeah, I think kind of goes to that, like, you can have a character that has their own internal antagonist.
Did you see Wild?
No.
Yeah.
That's a similar thing, because she goes on this journey, and there's the physical elements of the journey itself, which provide an oppositional element. There's a guy or a couple of guys that she gets a little scared of at some point in terms of maybe being a threat to her, but it's basically her own self. As I recall, it's Cheryl Strayed, right? I wrote the book. Reese Witherspoon starred in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think Cheryl had been dealing with some abuse issues, addiction issues or whatnot. And this was part of that process to try and come to grips with that. Mm-hmm. And so absolutely, well, addiction, that's another thing that would be a situation where that aspect, that personal aspect is functioning as a nemesis dynamic, that's pulling somebody toward someplace they should not be, should not have. I mean, that's my Texas side thing coming out, should not have. Yeah.
Vicky has a question about AI, but we're going to get to AI later, Vicky. So don't worry, we're going to get to that. So Elizabeth has a longer question, but the first part of the question is that, is it okay with a strike? Is it okay to enter contests? And that her understanding of the WGA rules is that you can enter a contest as long as you don't engage in having your script optioned or sold or anything like that. And that is my understanding as well. There was a movie maker did a great doing do's and don'ts for pre-WGA, and they interviewed Franklin from The Blacklist. I'll drop that link while Scott addresses that, but I'll grab that and drop the link in the chat.
So I don't pretend to be an expert. Please don't, quote me on this. I know about as much of this as I have just from reading the strike rules from the Writers Guild. Oh, by the way, all right. Solidarity. I'm serious. I've been a member of the guild since '87. This is my third strike. So, but yes, I think you can do pretty much everything. If you sell something, if you sell something to a guild signatory, you'll never get in the guild. Do that during the strike. I know that for a fact. That's clearly stated. I mean, it's like bluntly stated by the strike rules and WGA representatives. But like seeking out representation, I think that's okay. A contest, I think that's okay. Frank, as you said, Franklin Leonard, they said, no, it's okay for people to host their scripts on the Blacklist website. So I assume that's the same for all the other of those websites that do that sort of thing. The one thing you can't do is then, actually negotiate a deal or be working on it on the sly, with producers or whatnot. I think that's fair to say. Again, I'm not an expert on this. If you have questions, that article, Movie Maker, that's actually an interview with a WGA member. So that's probably a good place to go. But, I remember in the last strike, a lot of spec scripts came out afterwards, because so writers were clearly, working on, oh, by the way, I think you can write podcasts. Podcasts don't fall under the jurisdiction of the Writers Guild at this point.
Oh.
So,
by the way, speaking of, Sadie and I it was out last week. Did we put that out? Our latest Reckless Creatives podcast, which you should all be following Reckless Creatives and subscribing, is about audio fiction. And this couple has 12 million downloads. So check that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My understanding is the same as yours, Scott, that all that stuff, as long as you don't sell it, you can even have meetings with reps. Like you can even get repped, but as long as your rep understands that they're not allowed to go out with your work. And a lot of the contests, like in terms of, Script Pipeline and a lot of the other ones, if you just go look at their Twitter feed, they'll say, or go to their site, every one of them that I've seen is like, we're still running the contest, but we're going to choose the finalists, but we're just not going to go out with anything until the strike is over. Like they're not, a reputable contest isn't going to do anything to hurt your career. So
right.
Go check first before,
Yeah. It's a legit contest if they have that disclaimer. So that's like your first hint. And I believe also the Writers Guild on their website, they have, they're updating daily their FAQs, and they even have in there that you can contact them directly if you have any legal questions about what you can and can't do, and they are more than happy to help everyone out the best that they can. So I suggest following them as well.
There's links to their contact information in that Movie Maker article that Scott was talking about. I dropped in the chat, but for anybody who's not here live, it will be in the recording, but it's also on the page that promoted this. I added that link, and I also dropped a link in the chat to Scott's blog, where Scott has been updating his blog with strike updates and information. So there's a link there too, and we'll make sure we put that in the email when we send you guys the recording.
Can I jump in real quick to ask a question? Have you heard about like the fellowship programs like Warner Brothers and Universal and Nickelodeon?
Those I think you're not supposed to do. I think the ones that are associated with a company that they're striking against, I think you're not supposed to.
Okay.
But if you're unsure, contact the WGA just to get clarification. But that would make sense, though. I mean, they're all struck companies. So
yeah.
Yeah.
The second part of Elizabeth's question is, advice that you might have for somebody who's like really motivated, but maybe has a little kid and a father with dementia, like, or whatever, like
Wow.
doesn't have a lot of time, but has so much determination. And is there some sort of order of operation that you would suggest for training? Like, should they study story structure first, or character, or mechanics? And, just any thoughts you have about how to help somebody who's super busy. And somebody else asked about like any kind of recommendation about like a basic how to write a script,
So that's a lot of stuff.
When you're really busy, how the hell do you do it, Scott? Let's just boil it right down.
Okay, well, I got two pieces of advice, but let me show you this. Read scripts, watch movies or TV, write pages. That pretty much sums it up. Now, I teach at a film school, so I'm not diminishing the importance of a structured environment, and we've had many of our students go off and do really, really well, including there's one student now who's one at Sundance and is now spending 6 months in Cannes at a writing lab there. We had a student who won the Slamdance Grand Jury Award for drama this year. So I just saw her film here in Chicago. It's great. Awesome. But so you can, if you're really diligent, if you watch movies or TV, you read scripts, you write pages, you just keep doing that. Eventually you'll probably get to where you need to get to. But I do have two specific, like really helpful, I think, things for was it Elizabeth, I think, who asked that question? One, now this comes from Larry Gordon. Larry Gordon produced 48 Hours, Die Hard, produced K-9. He was from Mississippi, so now I get a chance to do my Southern accent. He said, Scott, all you got to do is write 1 page a day. 1 page. Write 1 page a day. That's 2 screenplays a year, 120 times 120. So, actually, I have this thing broken that down. If you'd spend a month prepping a story, in 4 months, a page a day, 120 pages, and a month rewriting it, that's 6 months. That's a script. Then you do that again. You do that twice a year, you got 2 scripts, 1 page a day. Now, I can relate to Elizabeth in this regard. I was a house dad. I was the dad for my little 1-year-old for a year when my wife was working at ACLU full time in LA. And so I was hanging out at home with this little dude, and I learned that you can be really efficient and get stuff done during their 30-minute nap.
Like a writing script.
Sleep. You get on the computer and you know exactly what you're going to be doing in terms of writing that scene. You're ready to go and you just do it. Knock it out. They wake up back to being, uber dad. But you can be, it's amazing how much you can get done in 30 minutes. You think you don't have time? Well, what do you do during lunch? Why don't write while you eat, So there's that. Now, here's something I came up with, and it's very popular on my blog. I came up with it actually when I was working with some college seniors as they were getting done. They said, well, how are we gonna keep being, productive in LA? At 1, 2, 7, 14. 1, 2, 7, 14. 1, you read 1 script a week. You got to be reading scripts. So you just commit yourself to reading 1 script a week. 2, you watch 2 movies a week. One of them you kick back, popcorn time. But the other one, scene by scene. You stop it and you do a scene by scene breakdown so that you're really digging down and analyzing it. 7, that's 7 pages, 1 page a day. 14, try and find 2 hours a day for you to be doing some sort of productive work like research, character development, story ideation, brainstorming, that sort of thing. So 1, 2, 7, 14. That is a way that you can structure your life and be productive. Now, I know that people may not have that much time, but there's a harsh reality that someone told me once, said, Scott, when you're not writing, someone else is. And there's just no way to escape that. If you live in LA, you know what I'm talking about. Going for coffee, any coffee shop, forget it. You usually feel guilty by the time you get out of there because everybody's got Final Draft open, So you've got to use those positive motivators, which is like, this is my dream, this is my aspiration. In 10 years, I imagine this is where I'm going to be. And you got to use those negative motivators, like when you're not writing, someone else is.
Yeah.
You got to use both of those pistons. I find, everybody's different, but for me, I need both of those to help drive me in the writing. So I hope that helps, Elizabeth. Good luck with all that.
And Elizabeth has a follow-up clarification. She writes an hour a night as soon as her toddler goes to sleep, but she's also wondering specifically about what technical skills she should prioritize to improve. Like when she mentioned story structure and character development and all. Read Scott's book.
Yeah, first get his book.
I was going to say, it also makes it more, frankly, I'm sorry, it makes it a little more fun than just like, okay, this needs to happen on 25 and that needs to happen over here. You're living with the characters. You're getting to know these people who are like this little community of individuals in this little story universe, and you're getting to know them, and they become like your friends in a way. I mean, they become part of the fabric of your life. And so the single hardest thing sometimes to write is just to get your ass in the chair to sit down and do it. But if you're in love with your characters, if you're like, and they can be jerks, like on Succession, those poor characters on that show, man, they're all just completely horrible, but they're so fascinating, right? So it's not like you have to
train wreck.
I'm sorry?
A train wreck.
It's exactly what I said. That's what I told my oldest. I said, this is like watching a train wreck unfold this season. It's like painful to watch, but in a really entertaining way, but that's one of the reasons why I think character-driven storytelling is so valuable, is that you get in touch with these people, not necessarily people, these sentient beings, and they become part of your life. And so in terms of technical skills, there's that quote from John Milius. He says, I could teach you everything you need to know about screenplay in 15 minutes. And with screenplay software nowadays, you don't even need to worry. You just go tab, enter, whatever, So you don't need the format thing is like, but it's what people want in Hollywood is, you need to be able to write, solid plot and structure and all that stuff. But they want writers with voice, they have a unique voice, and they want characters. They want, if you're working in TV, it's like so much about the characters. It's like, how are you going to sustain 5 or 6 seasons or 3 seasons unless the characters have room to grow? And so it's up to us to know those layers of things going on with them that you can lean into. So I know a guy who was I know a story. I actually saw him. I used to have an office over in the old MGM lot. I had an overall deal with Warner Brothers when they owned that before Sony bought it. And there was a guy, Antoine Fisher. He was a security guard there. And he told his story to, I think it was Peter Guber. And Peter said, well, write that script. And he did. He turned in like this 160-page thing with the pages all ruffled and, just a big mess. But the story, the characters were compelling, so you want to have all the technical stuff down? Sure. But if you can make me care, that's what Andrew Stanton said in that TED Talk, make me care, make the audience care. If you can do that, you've got 90% of it done right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to add to that, I think also, like, for me personally, when, I was trying to figure out what I struggled with as a writer, it really came down to getting feedback from folks that I trusted their opinion to tell me, like, the pacing's off, or, you need to work on shortening your descriptions, or, stuff like that, where it's like when you're starting out, like, okay, this is how you write a screenplay. And then now I can really focus on my characters and that voice. And I think just getting feedback from your friends and peers that you trust can really help you kind of like distill down like what you need to focus on. Because if you hear the same thing 3 times, right, that's probably the thing you need to start working on. So I would just add to that as well.
Yeah, writers group would be huge, right? Yeah. Well, let me ask both of you, do you find you learn stuff by reading scripts, like, contemporary movie scripts or specs?
What's lovely is like, I like reading the ones where it's like when they really put their voice in it, like their writing voice in it. So it makes it interesting to read too. It's like, you don't have to just make it so technical. You can make it interesting. That's what I like.
Yeah, I just actually read one. There's this movie coming out called Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, and it's a take on Shirley Jackson's Frankenstein in a modern, version. But I read his screenplay, and it just, from watching the movie and then went back to the screenplay and just going through it flows so nicely where, it's not big blocks of text. You're just immersed in this character and her world and the world building he does in it. And I'm just like, that's how it's done. Like, you're so like, I could not, look away from the screenplay because I was learning so much from him in terms of just the pacing and where you put in little like Easter eggs in there that you'll pick up on later on and that kind of stuff that I just find so fascinating. And then when you watch something again and you pick up on that later, I think it's just, it's a nice little like writerly trick that I'm hoping I can do in my own stuff. So I'm always reading stuff like that. We're like, oh, okay. Don't make it so obvious or like, don't be so subtle about it.
Well, setups and payoffs are like hugely valuable. You plant a seed here, you pay it off 40 or 50 pages later. It's a great, first of all, it's like a callback in comedy where you have a line and then 5 minutes later in your set, you call it back. Now you get a double laugh because you've got, oh yeah, I remember that line. Well, it's a way for us. So there's that, but it's also a way for us to measure the growth of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If they start off here and you have this, and then you come back here and you go, oh, wow, they have really gone through a substantive change over this time, or maybe they haven't, maybe they refuse to change and the situation is different. But setup and payoff. This is, again, a lot of this, when you read scripts, you're going to get like consciously, you're going to acknowledge, oh, wow, this person's doing the haiku style of writing, like in Wall-E that Andrew Stanton did, or the draft that Walter Hill did of Alien, where they don't do the wraparound, but they hit shift enter and come down, and it's this kind of poetic, very terse, tight, lean type scene description. So you're consciously getting that. But the more scripts you read, you're subconsciously, you're just like by osmosis. So when you're constructing scenes or you're thinking about transit, or not thinking, you're feeling your way through that draft, this stuff just starts to come out. So I can't recommend enough reading scripts. It's just, I interview every year. I've interviewed every Nickel winner since 2012. And I interview blacklist, people who make the annual blacklist. And this year, I think I interviewed, interviewed like 12 of the blacklist writers. And you read those scripts, they're not only a snapshot of like the best unproduced scripts in Hollywood, which is how Franklin Leonard describes that, the annual blacklist. It's also a snapshot of the sensibilities, the style, stylistic and voice that Ginny was talking about. This whole thing about, you see on the online screenwriting universe about unfilmables, you still run into this. You can only write what, the audience can see and hear. That's it. You can't write anything else. Well, anybody who just takes any time to read any contemporary screenplay by any contemporary screenwriter will know that's not true. It's just not true. You have to be judicious. It's not a novel, but you can sometimes comment on the action, on the moment, the emotion. You can even, from time to time, enter into the inner life of a character and express what they're feeling. You can do that. They've been doing that for 70, 80 years. I'm a student of the history of screenwriting. I used to teach a class called History of American Screenwriting, created by my former colleague, Dana Cohen. And so it was a great class. You go through decade by decade and you see the evolution of screenplays. And they've been doing this since, I don't know who. I have a theory that it's some dude in the basement in Nebraska who comes up with these screenwriting rules. You can't use we, you can't say we see, we hear. You can't do unfilmables. It's just, there are no rules. There are no rules.
One of the things I'm doing right now is I started reading the first Game of Thrones book because I watched the whole series, but it's like, oh, now let me go back and read the book and see like how much of it did they put in, how much of it, and that was such a complex, there's so many characters, it's hard to keep track of everybody, but it certainly helps reading it after having watched it. Because you have a
Well,
frame.
you're writing a novel now, right? That's the thing you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get into sort of a different space, but again, reading, reading writers who are good. And then the more you read like that, the more you start thinking like that, and the more it'll come out your fingertips,
I agree. I mean, it seems like that's the one area where people tend to fall down. They'll watch movies and TV, they'll write pages, but to sit down and read a script, come on, really?
Well, so this is a couple people have asked the question about where to find scripts to read. I know at some point on Script Magazine's site, I know there's a page I created. And so there's also one on Script Chat site. But if you just go on scriptmag.com and search for downloadable screenplays or something, I'll find a link to it and put it in the
So Jeannie, there's this thing I've heard.
And you too, don't you have some?
I only get ones that the studios put out in that 4-year consideration thing, because I'm not gonna, I mean, you can go anywhere and find them illegally hosted, I don't do that. But there's this thing called the Google, and you go name of the script, and then you type screenplay, and you type PDF, and you push return, and probably about 60% of the time you do that, you will be led to somebody somewhere in the world who's hosting that script. Now, I'm not saying you download that script. I wouldn't say that necessarily. But
read it without downloading it.
Yeah. Or if you want to do it legally and see a hard copy, if you live in LA, go to the Writers Guild Foundation Library, which is closed right now because of the strike. But when they are back open, I totally recommend going there. And the librarians there are so just insightful and knowledgeable about everything that they have there. And if there's something that you're looking for specifically, they will do their very, very best in finding that for you. But it's always cool to see the hard copies on their shelves and what they're doing from the actual writers.
They're especially good because there's a lot of scripts from the 30s and 40s that have not had PDFs made of them.
Yeah.
And so you're literally reading.
Yeah. Bring your white gloves. Yeah. Get ready to start flipping pages. Yeah.
It sounds like a religious experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're in you're reading Billy Wilder right there. It's like, ooh, God, yeah.
So amazing. So, somebody asked, we talked about therapy already. So I want to talk about Nancy asked regarding character, how much backstory for your characters do you do? I'm assuming maybe Nancy's talking about prior to writing, how much work do you put into the backstory? Or maybe if Nancy wants to clarify in the chat, if she's talking about in the actual script.
So again, this is all just different language systems. I look at 2 components to this. So as you're brainstorming and you're doing this character work where you're, questionnaires, biography, free scene writing, and then you're moving more intimately into the characters with interviews and stream of consciousness and monologue, you're doing these things. All this stuff comes out, right? And that's the brainstorming list, is you just put it all in there. You do not pre-edit, you put it all in there. And that represents their personal history. That's everything that's happened to a character that you've, found through your creative process. But then you need to go through that content and you identify the key narrative elements, moments, traumas, experiences, associations, feelings, and whatnot. And out of that, you pull them out, and that becomes the stuff of their backstory. The backstory is, in screenwriting terms, as far as I'm concerned, those are the dynamics that the character, particularly the protagonist, is going to be dealing with in the movie. So not everything that's happened, not the fact they had a Pop-Tart 2 days ago, when you were doing an interview or whatnot, that's not terribly significant. But for some reason, this chocolate milkshake on the floor of a car in a rain-slicked road, that just is stuck with you. That's going to be probably tied to some event that was of some significance, and there is something that they're going to be dealing with. So the metaphor here is an iceberg. This is not my theory. It's just something I've stumbled on. 90% of an iceberg is below the water, 10% is above the water, right? The triangle, right? And that 90% represents all of that work that you've done on the character's personal history. And the backstory elements are in play in that 10%. But you've got, there's that quote from Tarantino. He says that the audience doesn't need to know everything about my characters, but they need to know that I know everything about my characters. And so how much do you need to know? At some point you just kind of go with your feelings. You feel like you've understood them. Particularly if you understand that what I call the unconscious goal, that deepest need, the reason why the story exists for the protagonist, and you understand why this character, what their function is, and this character, what their function is, and you've got those major plot line points, then at some point you just go fade in, boom, feel your way through that first draft. But you've got to know enough that you understand why this character is going on this journey. I have that last question, the protagonist character treatment. You all know this. Why does this story have to happen to this character at this time? It's not random. It doesn't happen 2 weeks ago. It doesn't happen 3 years from now. It happens right now. There's a reason. The universe says, you know what? You're not living the right life. We are going to put this big whammo right in your life right now, call to adventure, inciting incident, and you're going to have to change. That's you get a note that your mom is dying of cancer. You get kidnapped. You flunk out of class. You get fired. That thing is the universe saying you have to change. And the reason you have to change is because you're not living, I'm saying to the protagonist, you're not living an authentic life. You've got to go through this process, that outer journey feeding your inner journey. So the more you know about that inner stuff, the better. There's no set answer. It's not like there's a 10-page workbook and you've completed this thing and then you can sign off and say, oh yeah, I now know everything I need to know about this character. By the way, even if you in breaking your story, you've gotten it down to a scene by scene outline, you're going to learn more about the character when you write the drafts. And at some point they're going to say, hey, that outline you have? Guess what? I'm walking off the page. I am now going to go do something different. I'm writing the scene and my character's like, whoa, where are you going? Well, you want to follow the character because they know they want to take you somewhere, Yeah.
That reminds me of like documentary filmmaking. When you, as a documentarian, you go in with a set of questions and the intent of like, this is the things we're going to have to hit topic wise. And more often than not, when you're talking to that subject, they will reveal something or tell you something they've never shared before that just takes your story like somewhere else completely different, but it's usually for the best. And then it just kind of expands that world for you. And I feel like that's kind of what you get with these characters that are like living and breathing in your head and then hopefully on the page.
Sadie, it's so interesting you say that. We have a documentary film division here at DePaul in the film school. And I was having a conversation with a faculty member the other day about that. I was saying, you know what? I think you all have like real courage. Like if I don't know the ending, I can't possibly type fade in. Y'all go out there and commit to this thing, knowing that more than likely you're going to learn stuff that's going to ship. You go in, you don't know the ending,
Mm-hmm.
You think you may know the ending, but so yeah, it's that's quite true. But we need to be willing to do that. We need to be willing to follow our characters. For example, let's say you're doing one of those meditative type things. I was talking about the stream of consciousness or monologue, the Vulcan mind meld thing, where you're in their head or they're in your head, and you set up, 15 minutes. There's my timer, and I'm going to just blind type, and I've got them in my head. I got an image of them. I'm going to put my fingers on the keyboard, and I'm just going to type and see what comes out. Right? Okay. So you're doing that. And let's say you're working with a character named Paul. Okay, so you're doing this and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, Jill shows up. Well, if Jill shows up, you need to say, Paul, I'll see you later. Jill, why don't you come on in here and let's have a little conversation? And off you go with that. Because if Jill shows up, chances are Jill wants to tell you something, So much of this is about feeling. You're feeling your way through this, and that's the idea that we reduce. And this is, by the way, now this is going to lead into AI. We reduce screenwriting to story beats that fit some sort of paradigm. Oh God, don't get me started. It diminishes the craft. It deludes people into thinking that this is what the craft is. And when in point of fact, it's like you the best way to write a fully fleshed out dynamic story with characters you care about is just to feel your way through your experiences with them and put all that stuff down. And then you step out of the story. I'll wrap this up, this little sermonette. There's receptive writing, which is what we were just talking about. And then there's reflective writing. So there's one where you're inside the story universe and you're rubbing shoulders with these characters and just getting to know all that stuff and roiling around, like we said, in the creative mud. But then sometimes you step outside. And this is where, you can use your left brain and say, well, oh, that looks like this kind of a subplot here. It's protagonist mentor subplot. That's interesting. And I don't think this character really makes much sense. I'm going to pull that character out, or right. So you got to do both, but you got to start from the feeling place. You got to start with the characters and get to know them. That's my belief. So.
And I agree. And I think that, like, I'm doing so much research for this book. It's historical fiction, blah, blah, blah. So I'm meeting all of these characters. I'm listening to all these different podcasts, when I'm writing. So when you talk about the 14 hours, some of that can be like when I'm up for a run, I'm listening to a podcast, or like anything that keeps my head in that world and keeps me, thinking about ideas. But one of my friends said to me, like, when are you going to sit down to write? I'm going to make you sit down to write. And I said, you know what? I will know when it's time. All of a sudden, I'm going to get to a point that I'm just going to say, oh my God, I have to write this story. And now I know them. I know these people. I know where I'm going with this. I'm understanding that question of why these people, why right now. But going back to what you were saying about like this thing that happens to somebody that makes you, that this is the moment you have to change, something happens. I would strongly recommend, there's a book that Ellen Burstyn wrote called Lessons in Becoming Myself. And it is a beautiful book. It's an autobiography, but it's not something that you would think is like, oh, I'm going to talk about all these movies I've been in. And, which, by the way, same time next year, favorite movie ever. But she talks about the lessons she learned in life and how she had to get hit over the head by a 2x4 over and over and over again, figuratively, over and over and over before she finally said, I better learn this lesson. And each time she said it was harder than the last time because she didn't learn the lesson. So it's the same thing we do to our characters. You challenge them with something that you think might make them change, but it's not enough. And you've got to do it again, and you've got to do it again, and you have to escalate it. And that is often true in our lives. And she wrote very bravely about it. It's a fantastic book. Highly recommend. Just saying.
That sounds great. I'm put it on my list.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you can, that's one of those great questions of the ones for the protagonist character treatment that came from Robert Town. He says, "What do they fear the most? What does a character fear the most?" That's a great question because they build up defense mechanisms to avoid feeling those things. So now you're not only talking about trying to dig down to find out but all that structural psychological stuff that they've done to avoid feeling that. And if you can get down there, and even better, if what they fear is what they have to face in the story. Now you've got something really dynamic.
And when we talk about therapy, like, my therapist always told me, like, pay attention to what makes you cry. So like, if you're talking to your characters and there's this thing that, that just like, there, that's the thing. There's something behind that, sorry.
But that's exactly right. You're talking about human emotions.
Right.
This is where stories live or die.
Yep. If you're not going to make people feel, then what's the point?
Yeah, that's why Ray Bradbury's got that great quote. When you sit down to write, don't think, period, feel, period. I think that's absolutely true for the first draft. I mean, subsequent, there are times where you have to kind of step out and manage it, but that first draft, I tell my students all the time. I'm teaching a class right now. They're undergraduates. They're writing their first feature film script. And I said, you know what? Grades, if you get the things in on time, but I want you, when you sit down to write, follow the advice of the great screenwriting guru, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Go with your feelings. I want you to feel your way. Get in touch with your characters with every scene. What are they feeling right now as they enter the scene? What's their goal in this scene? Where is the protagonist in terms of their psychological journey, their arc, and then just feel your way through that. And that maybe that scene you write is 5 pages and it only should be a page and a half. Well, trust me, by the time you get done, after you're rewriting, you'll get it there. But you need, if you need to write 5 pages to get a page and a half scene, so be it. You're feeling your way through it, So yes, emotions, feelings, that's.
Well, here's a couple questions that have absolutely nothing to do with emotions and feelings.
Oh, okay.
Just practical questions. Someone was asking if, how important the formatting of the screenplays are. And somebody else was asking about page count. Like when I'd started 120 was it, now like 90 to 110. And even if those last 10 pages that get it to 120 are so important, should you still try to keep it to 9? So those are 2 technical questions.
So legit questions, because there are these people who are the threshold guardians of Hollywood. They are the script readers. And some of them are mature and have been doing this for quite some time. And this will be less important to them, page count. But many of them are like interns, and not terribly well trained, or they're very young on that side of things. And they've been told, like, you have scripts over X amount of pages, then, like, I just wrote co-wrote a script with someone, and it came out to 116 pages, and it got dinged too long, So 105 seems to be the magic number. But that kind of thinking, 95% of your process as a writer should not be that kind of thinking. You got to write the story and find the emotions and find the characters and, just get that rich stuff. I know for a fact that if I said, Lee Broche McKenna did a Writers Guild Women in Film, Blacklist Women in Film, not Writers Guild, Blacklist of Women in Film event. And she looked at all the women in the group. She said, I guarantee you, if you gave me your scripts, I could knock 10 pages out of your first act. So if your script's long, I could give you a tip right now that you could probably knock 2 pages out, and that's get rid of every single orphan, which is one word sentence. Get rid of parentheticals. Actors cross them out anyhow. It's terrible. I'm not saying you can't use parentheticals, obviously, but if you're looking to cut pages just for a technical thing, don't use transitions like cut to or dissolve to. You just use scene headings to indicate this is a new scene. Now you've saved yourself 2 lines right there, So page count, because they will ding you. They're the threshold guardians. They may not understand the story at all, but they'll say, no, it's too long. And so, I'm not going to give this pass. Right.
Yeah.
So there is that reality, you got to live with it, but hopefully you write a story that's so compelling and cool and entertaining and emotionally riveting that stuff doesn't matter. But
it's always, but I love that whole cutting down part. Like one of the things that I do is, I think I wrote an article on Script Magazine when I had Sadie's job, about polishing a screenplay. And I learned this trick from my writing partner at the time, who used to work with Roland Joffe and all this stuff. And he used to go for all these NDA anonymously rewriting somebody for no writing credit. But he would tell me his trick, because that's what he'd get hired to do, to rewrite, to make it a fast read. That was his thing. So he taught me how he did it. When he would take each scene of the screenplay, literally create a separate document for it, so that there was once he got to the part when the story was there, everything was there. Now he just needed to make it tight. And he would just go through and get rid of any unnecessary word, just like you said, those little orphans, getting rid of all that stuff. So it's be like, do you really have to use all those words? And I think that one of the best tools for screenwriters was when Twitter was 140 characters, because it forced you to, how can I say this and what I want to say in just 140 characters? That's why I didn't like the bump up to 240. I thought it was lazy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have this, since I teach, I come up with and blog, I just constantly come up with these tools or whatnot. So there's the 3 E's. Any scene, any line, you start with, is it essential? Is it essential? Does it have to be there? One way to test that is you take it out. If you take it out, does it make a difference? Whether it's a scene or a line or a side of dialogue, right? Is it essential? Is it efficient? Is this the most efficient way? And by the way, I tell my students, I say, who had a really bad experience with an English teacher in middle school or high school, and everybody will raise their hand. What was their name? Mr. Miller. Okay, I say, you know what? You're now writing a screenplay. You can tell them to go bug off, because you don't need to write complete sentences. You can just use a single word. You can make up words. You can use bad grammar and dialogue. This is just this is your way to get back. So you just write, it depends, like if it's an action or a thriller, just single words, 2 words, right? Is it efficient? You don't need to write complete sentences. And then is it entertaining? That's where we end up, but you've got to start with, is it essential? There's times where you look and you say, this scene's really important. You take it out and, well, you know what? Didn't need it. That's 2 pages I don't need. The other thing is, I'm a fan of poetry. I've written 2 poems, got them on my front door of my office. They're just silly little, witticisms right now. But a friend of mine turned me on to poetry years ago, and I don't propose to know anything about it, but I do appreciate their efficiency of their language, the word choice, that they slave over every single word. And that's what we need to do when we write scene description. Think of it more like poetry than prose. Vivid, images, strong verbs, right? If you have these little imagematic bursts of words, you cut down all of a sudden the 5-line paragraph of scene description. It's 2 lines, and it reads better, and it's easier to read, and it's more imagematic. The word I made up. So you can't, it's screenplay has got limited real estate. It's not like a novel. You can go on for, Jeannie will probably write like an 800-page novel.
Oh God, stop. I'll be dead by the time I finish.
Okay.
Which could be the case anyway.
750 pages. So we'll cut off 50 pages.
Yeah.
But you've got 105 pages, 90 pages, whatever the genre is. It's limited real estate. So you've got to be mindful of there's that story about Clint Eastwood would redline half his dialogue. You go through, dialogue, just cut half his dialogue. So you'd be amazed if you have that sort of mentality, like your ex-partner did, or the partner you used to write with, at how often the best dialogue is no dialogue. There's that story Liz Hannah told me when she was on the set for The Post with Spielberg and Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, and she's watching these scenes play out, and Spielberg would go cut and turn around to Liz. Does Tom really need to say that? Can't he just do that with a look? Does Meryl, do they need to have these 3 sides? Can't they just, this is Spielberg talking, right? That let the actors act. So yes, you have this kind of ruthlessness and this appreciation for efficiency, but also that it's more like poetry than prose. All that's going to help you write more tight and easier, good reads. That's what you want. You say that was a good read. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. The thesaurus is your best friend when you start going through that editing phase. And how can you distill that all down to 1 word or 2 words, like you said? I do that with my songwriting as well. And I see that someone wrote in here about writing lyrics. It's the same thing. It's like, how much can you say with little as much as possible, you know. And also when you're singing it or having a singer sing it, you don't want them to jumble what you're trying to get across. So it's like, okay, like it's like an actor reading lines. If it's jumbled for them, it's not going to work. You know, it's like, where do you edit? And like you said, sometimes it's just a lick, or you just have that pause and you don't have a lyric in that part.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Great. I mean, it is like songwriting is storytelling. And, you know, I hope you have a more successful career with your songwriting than I did. The only song I had that got any notoriety whatsoever, it was on the Dr. Demento show, which was a syndicated show that featured like sort of gimmicky comic songs. This is when I was doing my so-called stand-up comedy act for 2 years. I wrote a song. I had a character. I used to do these characters on stage. Mac Buck Jr. wore this big cowboy hat. And he sang a song, the title of which was, "How Can I Get Over Her When She's Still Under Him?" So, that was my big hit, Sadie. I think you can top that.
I don't know. That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
That's wild. And also too, with the dialogue, that not using the dialogue, I made one short film I wrote and produced and had somebody else directing. Highly recommend like being on set and watching actors say your words, or even if you just do table reads of your stuff. And then I had the same experience. I went in, I had them cut. I went in, I said to the director, I don't want them to say anything, and like nothing. And they were like, "Oh, great." You know, like, and it was so much better. It was just so much better. Like it's, you know, table reads are really good too.
Oh,
making a short.
Absolutely. And if you don't have actors around, just read it out loud yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you stumble over the words, chances are it's not very good dialogue, you know? So yeah, that's a really, I think it's a great idea to get on. We have a student film festival here at DePaul. We had 194 submissions this year. It was like great. You know, wow. We typically have a lot. We have a whole film festival that we do every year. We have
do Courier 12.
That was for a screenwriting conference. Yeah. This is different. This is It's called the Premier Film Festival. It's at the end of the year. We have like 600 or 700 people packed into the Music Box Theater, which is this beautiful old historic theater in Lakeview in Chicago. And we have a program. It's like an award ceremony. We have co-hosts and they do funny stuff. And then they watch a program, half of it. There's an intermission and then another program. We typically have like 100 minutes worth of films covering animation, documentary, experimental, live action, and music videos. And it's great. We've had people, we have guest jurors who are film programmers from major film festivals around North America. And so our students get their films programmed off of this thing. Anyhow, when I go through these 194 submissions, watching them, half the time I'm like, man, that could have been a good movie. They could have cut that 12-minute movie down to 6 minutes. They could have cut that 8-minute movie down to 5 minutes. You know, there's oftentimes it's just too long. Yeah. One interesting thing to do is to like read a script while you watch a movie. Mm-hmm. Like, do that with Shawshank Redemption. When you find that script that you can get online somewhere, read that while you're watching the movie. You'll see there's like 20% of content that was written that I'm sure was shot, but they ended up cutting it. We tend to, I think, overwrite most of this. You know, less is more sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back and ask a couple questions. So Philip wanted to know, and I think we know the answer to this question, your opinion and thoughts on MFA in screenwriting, directing, and film. P.S. Loved watching K9 on VHS growing up.
Oh, there we go. That's like 5 cents of my royalties there, residuals. Well, this is, that answer has changed. Like our program, they come out with a very strong portfolio of content. Mm-hmm. You know, they'll come out with 4, 5, 6 scripts, perhaps a short film or two. So it's a lot of content. You know, it's a rigorous program. You learn to work with a cohort. You know, you may be able to very well over time if you're on your own, doing what I was saying earlier, watching movies and reading scripts and writing pages. You may find it, but it may take you 10 years. Well, one thing that the film schools offer is in a compressed period of time, you can make those mistakes that you're going to make, but make them more quickly and in an environment where you can, reshape that stuff. Like we have a motto here. I came up with it for, which is learn your craft, find your voice, and make your mark. And so we're all about the theory and all that stuff, but finding your voice is huge. Really allowing and encouraging the students to do that. But here's why it's changing. We don't know what Hollywood is going to be. We don't know. Like right now, we're at an existential crisis point, frankly, I think, with this strike. And so I can't, in all honesty, say, to go to a film school, it's an expense. I'm saying this, and I'm teaching a film school, and I believe in what we do, and our faculty here is amazing, and we turn out really good writers. But it's an expense, and it's time, and 2-year program for film and 3-year for directing, So we just don't know what the business is going to be like. If it were anything like it used to be, I'd say, yeah, I think if you've got the passion for it and going in that you may not make a dime, which is you have the reality that anybody, whether they're doing film school or not, you have to take that attitude. It's that great quote from Levon Helm, the drummer from the band. Music don't owe anybody a living, he said. Any creative art, same thing. You cannot expect to make a dime of what you're doing. You got to do it because you love it. So, but nowadays it's a different situation, particularly if you're in TV. Mm-hmm. The suits over there it seems like they're trying to destroy TV writing, the writers' rooms for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't know what their logic is other than just uber greed. So I don't mean to sound too negative, but you've got to be mindful of just the changes in the culture of the business in Hollywood. If that's your intention, if you want to do independent film, yeah, that's great. And you'll find I remember I did something in Pittsburgh once, and we had a Zoom session with Barry Jenkins, and Barry Jenkins went to film school down in, I think, Miami or someplace, and he found his crew, he found his tribe, and when he wanted to make his short film, they pitched together $25,000 and they all worked on it and made it. So that's another thing that can happen when you go to school, is that you can find your tribe, your group. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of positives, but then there's also a lot of uncertainty, about it.
Yeah, I do hear a lot about film school. Like, I don't know, Sadie went, AFI, she can probably weigh in on this, but I also do hear people saying the big value of it is meeting people, and the next generation that would hopefully improve.
Yeah. And there's, the thing with going into an MFA program is that you're with like-minded people who are serious about what they're doing. And so, I mean, at AFI, I got some great things out of it. I got an incredible writing partner out of it. And then it's a great network of friends, and also just creative collaborators also that are, doing big things that will, you network. You're basically there networking, and, they're going to help you get your next job maybe, or you're going to help them get their next job. And that's really what it comes down to. And at AFI, they're like, it's going to take you 10 years to maybe sell something, and it's not going to pay off your student debt. I mean, I know for me, I'm taking mine to my grave, but I mean, it is all about the networking and finding your tribe. And then, of course, working really hard on your craft and your voice, but it really comes down to that. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. I mean, SC, AFI, probably UCLA, Emerson, NYU,
but not Ho-Bunk University. Yeah. Like if you're going to spend that money, it should be one that you can get that network that.
DePaul's a young program, so we don't quite have the cachet that, like SC does, the SC Mafia, they call it, but it's growing.
I mean, I happen to know a couple of professors at DePaul. I think 3 of them now.
Yeah. They're all great.
Yeah. The professors are great. Yeah.
Oh, seriously, fantastic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just saying. And I also, and in terms of like the future of, I am a very practical person, but I also believe in the power of the strike, and I believe in the power of, group of people saying we've had enough, and I'm hopeful that changes will be made, because these greedy bastards can't make all that money if they don't have really good shows that people are watching. Because there's also something else people can do is if the masses, the thing about this strike is they didn't have Twitter in 2007, 2008. And the power of the public, if somebody starts tweeting out, Jane Espenson starts tweeting out to everybody, cancel your Netflix subscription.
Yeah.
And the public starts getting involved in a way that hurts their pocketbook.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. That's what I did. Billy Ray, who was nominated for an Academy Award for Captain Phillips, and Todd Garner, who is a former studio executive, now he's a producer and done, tons of TV and film. Deadline is sponsoring a Strike Talk podcast every week. And I featured them on my blog. I think it was today, if I'm not mistaken. I sent some questions to Billy to answer. And one of the things he said was unsubscribe from Netflix, Apple, and Amazon until the strike's over. Right. So that's one thing you can do. You can also buy T-shirts like this from outfits that contribute money to this fund. Mm-hmm. It's not for writers; it's for everybody else that is attached to the business and is going to be impacted by that. But just talk it up. If they think this is, I think AI is the issue. Honestly, there's all sorts of issues monetarily, but the AI thing is really dangerous. I don't know what they're thinking over there, other than they're we're going to replace writers or something. And so with AI, I did that series I was mentioning. I'm it was really funny, man, to read this stuff. I had one where, oh God, I should have had that pulled up. It was just ridiculous. One where Indiana Jones is on an airplane with a Nazi.
You want me to find it, Scott, and I can share my screen?
If you go to
while you talk, I'll look. The Indiana Jones.
It says Chat GPT does Indiana Jones. Okay. And so the prompt was Indiana Jones is on an airplane, a German airplane with 3 Nazi soldiers. They're heading toward London. They're literally minutes away. And on the airplane is the first atom bomb. So this is like a parallel story. The Germans were working on that, and they had a heavy water plant or something in Norway that the Allies bombed. If they hadn't done that, they might have gotten the atom bomb first. I may be misremembering history, but I seem to remember that. Anyhow, so I did that prompt, and then Indiana Jones has got to stop these guys, And the first draft, first of all, every side of dialogue had a parenthetical. It's gritted teeth, serious, it's just ridiculous, right? It did write a beginning, middle, and end to the scene, so it understood that. And there's language and scene description that is written in a really kind of odd, overwrought kind of way, but the dialogue is just really okay. Now, intense. I won't let you destroy life. Indiana engages in a brutal hand-to-hand combat with the first Nazi crew members. The plane trembles and sways. You could say that's kind of interesting, good use of verbs there, but really, I don't know. But if you go down, shouting, not this time, but so Jeannie, could you go down a little lower?
Yeah.
Because I said, all right, but this doesn't have any sort of humor that Indiana Jones does. So if you go down a little further, you'll see that I amend the prompt. Go down, keep going down. Okay, now stop right there. So I said, give Indiana some sarcastic one-line put-downs of the enemy German airmen. So this was number 2. Now scroll down and just hit the lines of dialogue. Indiana Jones smirking. Well, looks like the Luftwaffe sent their best and brightest. Right? Go down. Indiana Jones mockingly. Let's see. Whoops. You fellas should stick to flying because this fighting thing, not your strong suit. Indiana Jones chuckling. I bet your mothers are proud of their little stormtroopers. Indiana Jones down at the bottom, smugly. Sorry, boys, but your flight has been ... Can't. It sounds like a bad version of a Sly Stallone movie from the 80s, right?
100%.
The last one, grinning. Well, it looks like I have a bomb to defuse. The Nazis can't even get that right. So, all right. So I go and I do these various things. I did 5 of them in 1 week. I'm sorry, just because it's so absurd. I don't want to diminish the seriousness of this. I mean, there are people out there like Billy Ray on that first podcast, that strike talk thing on Deadline, said that these mini rooms that they have now for TV, right? They're breaking up the idea of the writer's room, so they're hiring like 2 or 3. There's a showrunner, and then they hire like 2 writers to come in, or 3 writers to come into a mini room, and they're going to break the series and come up with outlines for each episode. Then they say bye writers, and the showrunner. And what Billy said is going to happen: the showrunner is expected to write that with the assistance of the AI. Right. So there's that. On the feature side, I think it's the opposite. I think what they're going to do is generate treatments or even shitty first drafts, written by AI, and then present them to a screenwriter and say, we want you to rewrite this. So what they've done is they've saved money for, the original story concept and the story development. And it's now an adapted story. It's no longer an original story, which means that there's less financial, cost for them. Now, I don't know where this is going. I know the Guild says, no credit. They can't do credit. They take a very strident response. Of course, the AMPTP's response was no response, except to say, well, let's propose annual meetings to discuss this new technology. They did this before with VCRs. They did this before with DVDs. They did this before with streaming. In 2007, 2008, they said, we don't really know what this is going to become, this content on the internet. So let's negotiate this deal. And the Guild did get their foot in the door on that. The very next day after the strike was ended, they announced Hulu. So, this is what I'm afraid about with AI, is that they're down the road on this. So I don't know. It's all, the courts could rule this is all plagiarism. That's all it is. It's just regurgitating pre-existing content. And the courts could rule you cannot own IP because this is not original content. So we may be saved that way. But here's whatever happens, I know this. I absolutely fundamentally know this. I don't care how smart AI gets or whatever, it will never, ever be able to, in any way, shape, or form, approximate the complexity and nuance of the human experience. No way. And so that's yet another reason to embrace character-driven storytelling. We can do what that will never be able to do. We can come up with characters who are richly multi-textured, multifaceted, with depths of complexity and all that stuff, and write great scripts that will make whatever AI puts out, put it to shame. So just in terms of like strategies, yet another reason to focus on character-driven storytelling, because that's something that no matter how smart it becomes, they'll never be able to approximate what it is to be a human being. The end of my sermons.
That's the best pitch for your book yet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, if there were only a book called The Protagonist's Journey, an introduction to character-driven screenwriting and storytelling.
Answer to AI. But and also like you said, like I think there is going to be a plagiarism issue, and that's a big risk for the studios to take. I'm hopeful that I'm not one of those people I'm a very practical person, so I like to plan for what if. And I think Scott's plan of focus your stories on character-driven stories and really, ramp up that and make sure there's like a lot of emotion and feeling and all of that in what you're writing. I don't want to think about it. WGA is going to take care of that. So cancel. You know what? I'm going to cancel my Apple subscription because I just don't like anything on Apple. So, so that too. It's only going to get worse if AI is writing it.
I gotta believe like participant media, Jeff Skull, their politics are, they've done all sorts of documentaries and films with like left politics, right? I gotta believe there's some billionaires out there to look at this as an opportunity. Like, no, we're not going to use AI. We're gonna reach out to the Tony Gilroys of the world and the young writers that are coming up that and write and do stories that are genuinely human and impactful, comedy, dramas, thrillers, and are going to commit to no, we're not going to use AI. We're not going to go down this route. We're going to actually have writers' rooms, pay writer. So I'm hoping that someone is going to like start just bringing some common sense to this, because honestly, there is no rationale for destroying a system that's worked for 50, 60 years on the TV side. I know that greed, the Bible says the root of all evil is the love of money. And I get that. And I think it's true. But at some point, how much is enough?
Yeah, and I also feel like that, like those people who are billionaires, or a lot of them have very good business sense. That's how they got that way. And when they're looking for a new business model, they're looking for what is a need that needs to be filled. And people have wanted to be entertained and listen to stories for all of eternity. And when they're churning out shitty stories, I'm just going to turn it off. I think that is a great idea. Let's do a campaign, try to get some rich person to start a studio, and then everybody can just say, piss off, we're over here.
Yeah, but just to go on a little tangent, or not really, but like, last time we had a strike, we got reality TV, and that's really bad content, and people went to it in droves and still are. So it's like, how do we make sure our audience is like in the know of actually good content and know that there's good writing out there when they're watching Kardashians and everything else?
See, this is I don't have a cynical side, but
this is the most cynical I've ever seen you, Scott.
It's because of the insanity of this one. That for 20 years they've been doing the franchise thing, reboots, remakes, sequels, prequels, sequels, taking things with male leads and having female leads. So in a way, this is this thought I had the other day, and I was like, oh God, I hope this isn't right. They've been conditioning us to watching regurgitated content. Well, what is AI but regurgitated content? So, I don't think they were smart enough to think this thing through.
Yeah.
But I think they're looking at it like, well, okay, if everybody's going to go watch Fast and Furious 25, and this time it's he's going to drive down the side of the Hoover Dam in a car. Okay, cool. Then sure, AI, lousy story, but they don't care. It's all spectacle. So maybe there is a portion of the population that will support that kind of stuff. But
there's also a comment that somebody made earlier tonight that we're just getting to because it fits in perfectly with this conversation. And this could be the truth that I wanted to know if the WJ strike would influence writers to become more independent content creators. And if we're making this stuff ourselves and indie film bursts up and film festivals become where people want to go, and then there's maybe Sundance, will air all of the films and like they do already. And, there's alternatives. And if people are always watching that and they're not watching this other stuff.
You gotta, I'm okay. Well, Sadie will appreciate this. So I was a musician for 7 years. I mean, I made my living playing music. I was living in Aspen, Colorado for the first 2 years and opened for acts like Richie Havens and John Prine and the new version of Poco. And, at that time was right when disco busted out, which was a problem for live musicians because they would just replace the live musicians with disco. And it was really depressing. It's very similar sort of, we get the writers, we get together and, over beers going, oh, this is not good. There's disco, there's replaces with AI, right? But then what happened is punk music came along right? And garage bands like Dire Straits. I don't mean they were literally a garage band, but stripped down music like Dire Straits, the Sultans of Swing. There's always a creative response.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a response. And so something is going to happen here, that's going to respond to what they're doing. And maybe this is the breakdown of Hollywood. Maybe Hollywood is just going to, like, what's that, the snake that eats its tail? I mean, maybe that's what we're seeing.
And maybe that's not so bad.
Yeah.
And something new forms out of it that's better and has a lot more original content. People that will have the kahunas to make things like Taxi Driver again. Those kinds of gritty character driven stories. So you better be ready, and you better have your character driven scripts all done.
Yeah, so we're kind of winding our way out of it.
We're figuring out.
Yeah. It all comes back to make us feel, right? I mean, when talking about music, going from disco to punk rock, it's about this energy of feeling of, hey, we have something to say, hear us out, and down with disco.
The parallel is really great now that I think about it, because punk music was so raw and real, right? And AI is not raw and real. It's at this point ridiculous, but I think it can be used. Actually, I will say this. We're dealing with this in film school. It's not going to go away. It's not like it's like Pandora's box. It's opened up, So we as writers have to learn to use it as a tool, and it can be helpful. I've already, with my MFA thesis group, I said, okay, you're week 2, you are responsible for coming in with 5 to 10 series concepts or movie concepts. Feel free to use ChatGPT, character in a subculture, and see what, give me 10 log lines. There's nothing wrong with that at all as a device to help with your story ideation process.
Help brainstorming,
character development,
or just prompts so you can start writing or something. Yeah.
So that part of the process, particularly the upfront, the sort of prep, breaking story, and all that, I think that's actually has some value. It's this other side of the thing, where they think we are going to plug in the 40 story beats from Save the Cat, and by the way, that could be replacing development executives. We don't need them anymore. Right. This is what we're going to do. This is how movies are supposed to be made. Bye-bye, creative executive. Bye-bye, director of development. Oh, by the way, we're going to make shot lists for every scene here. Bye-bye, director. We're going to have a handler for the AI with the shot list there, and the handler is going to be saying to the actors, okay, let's do it again, this time only faster. Okay, let's do it again, this time only slower. And that's going to be what directors do. So if people think they're immune to this, that they're safe from this, actors, same thing. Tom Hanks, I just read an article. He's trying to protect his image. It's like literally an article that came out today. Who's to say you need actors?
Right. The one thing too, another thing, if there's any novelists out there, like a lot of times when you're querying your novel to a lit agent, they always want comp titles. And so if you put in to the ChatGPT, I did this because I wanted to get recommendations of books I should be reading in that era. And I just put in, this is the kind of book I'm writing. What are the comp titles for other books that are not like bestsellers, but then not bestsellers? So then it gives you a list of comps, and that's super helpful.
Sure.
It's make it your writer's assistant. Yeah. Have it work for you. Yeah.
We're actually going to have a whole panel on AI coming up in one of the symposiums. And we have a guy who worked at Meta, who is also a writer, and he is going to talk about some of the things he does with AI to, just like you're saying, Scott, be like a brainstorming partner and all of that. So stay tuned. So a couple other questions. Annie, I wanted to just clarify. She asked about if she's not WGA, can she pitch, or is it, to a production company, and you can't?
I don't think so.
So just hold tight. You can pitch you can get a manager, but you can't pitch to somebody like a producer or studio or anybody. You can't option your script, but you could submit your script to a manager or an agent to see if you could get repped. But then you have to tell them you cannot send my work out. Which they shouldn't and wouldn't do anyway. If they're a good manager, they don't want to ruin your career because that's how they make money.
That's actually been really great to see the agencies and managers supporting the WGA. I was kind of concerned about that after that, everybody fired their agents like 3 or 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But they've all been united on this. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they see that this is a really important strike. Yeah.
Yeah. And somebody else said that they read that you can't even do a getting to know you call with producers. So like producers are just completely off limits. Like if somebody downloaded your script from the blacklist, that's fine. But if they reach out to you and say, I'm really interested, I love your script, just say, thank you for your interest. Let's talk when the strike is over. Simple as that.
But if a manager responds, yeah.
But if a manager calls you and says they love your script, you can have that conversation.
But you can't do anything with it until after the strike.
Right.
So write another script, be productive.
And I don't know if Matt's in the background listening, but he would probably approve this message. I feel like this is the time when your manager can't go out and do anything with you. And I mentioned this last night in our symposium. This is like the time to write the fuck it script, the script you've always wanted to write, the script that maybe your manager hasn't been into you writing, write it because nobody's holding you back. And that may be the script. Right. So, and make sure it's character driven.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, why not?
It's, 100%. So Kevin says, sort of a chicken or the egg question. Do you literally start with just character without a plot, or do you start with a rough idea of a plot, then focus on learning the character and see where they take you?
So my response to that was, because I don't think there's any right response. I think everybody's different, and I think every situation is different. Maybe I would come up with, I literally, it's like the last script I wrote, that when I'm rewriting, on spec, not for anybody right now.
Just to
be clear, was a premise, was a conceit. It was not characters per se. I mean, it did involve characters. The characters came about after that, so that's kind of unusual. Stephen King has that book on writing. If only there were a blog that did a year-long weekly series analyzing it, But he says to him, it's a character in a situation. That's where he starts, a character in a situation, because he wants to see what are the complications that can arise from that, right? So it doesn't matter, whatever it is, play around with it. Just see where you're imagining. Maybe you can get on ChatGPT and sort of just say, okay, here's this character, here's the situation. What can happen? Write me, a treatment of it as a comedy or a drama or a thriller or horror, and see what happens with that. But I don't think there's any right or wrong. You just be conscious of the fact that stories are out there all the time. They're there. They're just like Stephen King talks about. They're like fish floating over your head. It's like a river floating. There's fish, all these ideas. At some point, you just get the net and you go, okay, here we go. This is a character in this situation, So.
If you guys haven't read that book, Stephen King's On Writing, it's so good. That was my very first writing book that I read.
Is that right? Yeah.
Really good. And it's like 2009 maybe I read it. Somebody was talking about it on Twitter and I'm going, wait a minute, I think I need to read this book. I did. It was really good. I love what he says about like writing with the door shut, so that you're not thinking about anybody reading it, you're not thinking about anybody judging it, you're just right with the door shut and just pound it out and then open the door and see what happens.
So just what you were saying, Jeannie, the door is shut right now. You cannot sell things in Hollywood.
Right.
It's shut. So why not write your fucking script,
Exactly.
Yeah. You've canceled all your streaming services.
You got nothing else to do.
Maybe you still have a Blu-ray player. I don't know. You've already watched through all of your Criterion collection. So what else are you going to do?
You could just watch K-9 over and over. I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
You still have the VHS of K-9.
Yes.
You're okay.
I do. Like right over there.
Everyone go out and buy the VHS of K-9. Cancel all your streaming.
Yeah. Go on eBay. There will be a bidding war.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody else asked, I heard lately that practicing screenwriting is like practicing a golf swing. Does that resonate with you? And do you think that's kind of accurate?
Well, I'm a terrible golfer, so I was right up there. I got a negative association. No, I actually I just don't have time. Who has time to like go play, a round of golf? But Yeah, I think it's like anything, there is a certain virtue to practice. I don't know if that whole sort of 10,000 hours thing, is actually like legit, but the more you read and the more you write and the more you study movies and TV, yeah, I think it's just going to benefit you. So, like, I didn't go to film school. I had, I literally, all I had was a love of movies. I grew up in an Air Force base. They literally paid down the cost of going to see movies. I saw movies for 50 cents and I would go all the time to the movie theater. What else are you going to do in Minot Air Force Base? Go to movies. So I had that going for me. But you just, once you get into screenwriting and you catch that bug, like I think everybody here has, it's like, oh, it's just so beautiful.
It is that first.
Do it.
The first time, your very first time you print your script out and it's still warm in your hands, and
you put the brads in, and I was just thinking about you saying your students writing their first screenplay and just like feel your way through. It's like, oh man, to like be that bright-eyed kid writing your first screenplay. It's so exciting.
We're too old now to be bright-eyed.
Yeah, there you go.
So Scott. We were talking about my moving before. When I moved, I can't tell you how many brads I had. Because I lived in the same place for 22 years. And back then, when you sent your script out, you printed it out and put the brad in the top and the bottom and you mailed it.
Yeah.
A lot of brads.
Let me tell you, working at the writer's store for many years, putting together little bundles with the fasteners. And we had the one in Magnolia in Burbank. Yeah. And we had a little hammer, so like it's just clean, and counting them out individually. And
this is a pretty funny story. So like when I first broke, they didn't have PDFs. If you wanted to get a copy of a script, you had to get a copy of the script. And so there were two ways to do that, I found, apart from going to Samuel French's or whatnot. One, I would sweet talk my agent's assistant. Hey, that new Shane Black script, I know you got it. Would you mind? Can I buy you some donuts, please? The other thing was writers. You'd say, okay, I got Esther House's latest script. What do you got? Tarantino? Okay, I'll meet you in the corner of Crescent Heights.
Like a drug deal.
Yeah, just like drug. Absolutely. It's like a drug deal. Okay, what do you got? And so then you go down to Kinko's or wherever, and copy it off, and then you hand it back. And at one point I had 1,000 paper scripts, 1,000 of them, which I had then donated to the Dallas Screenwriting Network group for whatever reason. I just gave them all on the way. But that was the old days. Now it's all PDFs. These young people just don't know how lucky they got it. PDFs, the Google. So
I just want to read something that Matt just dropped in the chat. Matt's a partner at Pipeline and oversees the contest. And he said, regarding a previous question, when the smoke clears, we're going to have some great specs from this contest season to take out. So yes, everyone should be taking the time to write if they're able. I think everyone is going to be starving to read again and set up projects post-strike. So keep writing.
I agree. Keep writing. Yeah.
So Abby asks, how liberally should you use those unfilmables in descriptions?
Well, you got to be. The word I always use is judicious.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be judicious, and this is again where it's so great to read contemporary scripts. You see the sort of timing and flow of how they do this. It's not every page. It's not every paragraph. It's like those special moments where you've got two things you can do. You can comment as the narrative voice, the scene description as narrative voice. You can comment on the moment, and then very occasionally you can actually dip into the inner life of a character and express in scene description what they're thinking or feeling. You can get away with that. And so, but you don't do that. Like, it's not a novel. It's a different thing. It is fundamentally an externalized reality, action and dialogue. But we have that right. And don't let anyone tell you you don't. This unfilmable thing is bullshit. It just is. You just read contemporary scripts. Primarily, I say contemporary just because of style. It's way different than it used to be. But you'll see these writers, it's effective. What Jeannie was saying, you want a story that gets you involved and is entertaining and emotionally engaging. And if you're restricting yourself and not allowing yourself to do that, then you're hurting yourself. You're limiting your ability to convey that stuff to readers. So
yeah. Do you think that comes down to like, because I feel like any great director, producer, anyone can take something that's, unfilmable and make the thing sing and shine. But I feel like the reader or the gatekeeper, like, is it just lazy readers that they're just so put into like a box of like, it has to be 120 pages, and by page 30, inciting incident, or, just like all these things that they're looking for, that's a play by play.
So if you want the path of least resistance, you don't use we see, you don't use we hear, you don't use unfilmables. If that's your thing, it's like, I got to get past the gatekeepers. But I believe you need to write the story. You need to write the way it needs to be told, period. And you got to trust that at some point, someone is going to say, I get it. I get it. I know the guys who wrote A Quiet Place. It was turned down everywhere. And the one guy who saw it was the guy who makes the loudest movies in Hollywood, Michael Bay. So at some time, if it's great, somebody's going to find it. Somebody's going to respond to it. So, but you got to write now. Do the script. The door is closed. Don't write that script that you want and write it the way you feel like it should be told. And don't forget about the rules. There aren't no rules. So anyhow, that's my take on that. I just
burn it all down.
Burn it down.
Doesn't matter. Just write. Just do it.
Right.
Be reckless.
Yes.
Be creative and reckless. That would be a great name for a podcast.
No, amazing. Huh. Why didn't we think of that?
Yeah.
So and somebody, just to button up that what we were talking about with AI, somebody asked, does Scott feel that after a new deal is struck, we'll end up having another golden era of TV, only this time giving more and better ops for writers? A leading question, since I believe it. And I think we kind of addressed that, thinking everything, because this was asked about, I don't know, a half an hour ago. So I think we kind of addressed it.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what
we can hope.
Like, I have no idea.
I know. So Anus asks, in your professional opinion, would it be easier to work off of a series Bible for people who are writing novels or short stories, as far as getting into the background of a character and their motivations, etc.?
I don't know about series Bible. I mean, if it were similar thing to what I say is a master brainstorming list. But that's where you go. You create. To me, it's a Word doc. And this last project, there were hundreds of pages of content. Character development, all those exercises are on there. The plotting is all on there, Google Doc, which I was sharing with my writing partner. And so I don't know about series Bible, but the intent is the same, which is to learn as much about the characters and the plot as possible, and then to structure it so that at some point you bust out the index cards. You just do, because that's it. I mean, it's just like in TV writers' room, it's like index cards, and then you figure it out. This happens midpoint of Act 1, then if you want to be safe, just like in my book, you use the 8 sequence theory. I mean, it's like everybody in Hollywood knows about it. I don't know if they taught it at AFI, but I think at SC, they still teach that, that's the safest sort of path of least resistance. On the other hand, you go to John August's website and download the outline that he has for Big Fish. And I think he's got like 25 sequences, so that, again, there's no rules, but, bottom line, you just need to know as much about your characters as possible so that they inform the writing process and they enliven you and your imagination, and they come alive on the page. So when someone reads it, they lift up off the page and we feel it. We get them, we want to be with them.
Yeah. And when people are reading, like, to me, like, all of the sequences and all that kind of stuff is just sort of like it's a way to help you get started. Like you plug in, you figure out your characters and you kind of figure that kind of those broad brushstrokes out. But when people are actually reading it and they're really engaged and they have a good read, a fast read, they're not saying to themselves in their head, oh, this is the start of the 5th sequence. No. Like they're not even thinking about that. They're just in your story. So don't let it all of that kind of stuff distract you from just diving in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you don't want them to think about that. You want them to just forget about all of it and live in this world. I mean, that's the best.
I'll think about it afterwards. I'll go, okay, I'm going to read that script by Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I want to see what's going on there structurally. But when I'm watching that movie, I want to be weeping when she's I would always want to be with you. When that mother-daughter moment, are you kidding me?
Man.
That was so great. That scene was amazing, you know. But that's what the whole movie was about. The Outer Journey was all about just family connection, you know, emotion, right?
Yeah. So let's see, Crystal. Oh, Crystal's asking a pay question. Why is the bulk of the writer's pay, the percentage of the production budget, paid on the WGA confirming the credit at the end of the shoot, opposed to being paid on the first day of principal like other creatives and crew?
So there is this thing known as credits. And if it's a guild project, that's not determined until after the movie is shot, because there may be other writers who come in. And so they can't pay that back end payment until the credits are determined. And the Writers Guild, the studios at some point, after they got sick and tired of like, all right, I'm putting My Mistress on there, written by my mistress. I mean, they would do stuff like that back in the 30s and 40s. At some point, they just said, all right, Guild, you take over this. So the Writers Guild, I've done this many, many times, both as an arbiter and as a person who, you know, argued that I deserve credit, right? So the Guild has this process, and you can read about it. It's very, very clear. Like, you need to, you know, first writer gets a percentage, X amount of percent of credit. And then the subsequent writers have to contribute, you know, new scenes, new characters, you know, dialogue is the least important thing. You can change every word of dialogue and it won't make a difference in terms of may not make a difference in terms of the overall assessment as to who gets it. So the short answer is you can't get paid that back end until it's determined that you are sole writers. If someone else comes on, then it's reduced by 50%. If there's another person, it could be reduced. You're getting 33 and a third percent. So
because whoever, just because it's your script and you sold it and you brought it to day one of principal, doesn't mean that they're not going to fire you or bring somebody else on or do some comedy punch-up lines or whatever. So there's going to be most likely other writers that are coming in at some point.
Well, they may have already been involved rewriting at this point. So then it gets down to this thing where I literally once did a credit arbitration. They used to send it to me in my house in LA, the physical scripts. So there'd be a messenger, ding dong, go to my front door, and there's a box the size of Oklahoma. You know, there was like 25 scripts, you know, in there. So it was like 12 writers were involved in that process. So it can get pretty messy. Yeah.
So the last question somebody had asked was, in 5 years, is AI going to get better? Stop it. Stop it right now. Stop it. Stop.
I don't want generative AI. I want degenerative AI.
Well, Scott, thank you so much. Thanks for staying a few minutes extra, and so we could answer everybody's questions, and we got them all.
This is so great. This was amazing. And I mean, it's a little later here for us on the East Coast, but I want to write. I just want to lock the door now and just get to it. I'm inspired.
You know what? It'll take your husband a while to find you in that house.
Right.
So it's okay. But so I'm going to send you guys the recording, but I also want to tell you about a couple other things we've got coming up. If any of you are writing children's books, we have another free town hall. We've got like a bunch of free ones in a row, with a panel from the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So that's going to be on the 23rd. And then we have a logline workshop with Meredith Allen, this is the second one we've done. We do not sell the recording or anything like that, or put it out there, because we want you guys to just feel like what happens in the room stays in the room. So you can feel comfortable talking about your log lines and workshopping them. So that one's going to be on June 7th, on Wednesday, June 7th. It's a 2-hour session. So that'll be really fun. We did it once before. It was fantastic. And log lines are hard. And I was like, I'm doing it with everybody else, working my log line with everybody else. It was great. So, and then I'll send you guys the recording. I'll probably do it tomorrow morning and get that off to you, and with links to Scott's blog, his book, to, he also has, if you guys are on Facebook, Scott also has a really great group called Zero Draft 30. And sometimes he does 30 days of prep where you're doing all that character work before you start the 30-day zero draft. But honestly, if you're doing the character work before you start the zero draft, it's probably more like a first draft as opposed to draft, is my guess. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This was really fun.
Yeah, it's been always great talking with y'all. The only thing I miss is I was hoping to be serenaded by Sadie, but that's going to have to be another time.
Oh, well, I was hoping to get serenaded by you. So I guess we have to do a part 3, Reckless Creative with Scott.
There you go.
We just do
the musical.
Yes. see if ChatGPT can write that for us.
You should have ChatGPT write you to a song, and then you have to perform it.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I'm going to totally go to ChatGPT and say, the title of the song is How Can I Get Over Her When She's Still Under Him? Write me the lyrics for that song and see what it is. It's probably worse than mine, but better than it was. It was such a stupid song.
It'll probably just pull up your song.
Yeah, maybe. Dr. Demento show,
Yeah.
Put it in and see what it does.
Symposium is brought to you by Pipeline Artists, a division of Pipeline Media Group. To learn more about upcoming live symposiums, visit symposium.pipelineartists.com and follow us on Twitter @PipelineArtists.